New York Times faces backlash over misleading Gaza photo. The New York Times has recently found itself at the center of a significant controversy after it acknowledged using a misleading cover photo of a severely malnourished child from Gaza. This admission has led to accusations of journalistic malpractice, as the child depicted was suffering from a serious pre-existing health condition that was unrelated to the ongoing conflict with Israel. The situation unfolded on a Friday when the Times featured a stark image of a malnourished infant on its front page, accompanied by the grave headline, "Young, old and sick, starved to death in Gaza. There is nothing." The caption for the photo indicated that the boy was born healthy, while the article discussed the escalating hunger crisis in Gaza, highlighting the tragic deaths of Palestinians due to starvation. Among those mentioned was Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutawaq, an 18-month-old boy whose father was reportedly killed last October while searching for food. Social media users quickly pointed out that Mohammed was not a new face in the media. He had previously been featured by other outlets due to his significant pre-existing health issues, a detail that was glaringly absent from the Times' widely circulated story. After several days of silence regarding requests for clarification, the Times finally issued an editor's note acknowledging this critical omission. The note stated, "This article has been updated to include information about Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutawaq, a child in Gaza suffering from severe malnutrition. After publication of the article, the Times learned from his doctor that Mohammed also had pre-existing health problems." However, this admission was somewhat buried within the lengthy article, which had already been in circulation for over 4 days, leading many critics to feel that the newspaper did not. Adam Rubinstein, a former opinion editor at the Times, criticized his former employer, stating, "If you read carefully, this is an admission of a remarkable deception. They ran a story about malnutrition, but didn't include the context that the malnutrition is not caused by a lack of food, but by a pre-existing condition, a disease that affects the child's ability to thrive." He further emphasized that the original story was deemed fit for the front page, and thus the updated information should have been treated with equal importance. Journalist David Collier also weighed in, noting that the revelation raises serious questions about. Following the release of the editor's note, many took to social media to express their discontent with the Times. A spokesperson for the Times later commented, "Children in Gaza are malnourished and starving, as New York Times reporters and others have documented. We have since learned new information, including from the hospital that treated him and his medical records, and have updated our story to add context about his pre-existing health problems." This additional detail was intended to provide readers with a clearer understanding of Mohammed's situation. The spokesperson also highlighted the ongoing efforts of their reporters and photographers who continue to cover the situation in Gaza, often at great personal risk, to ensure that readers are aware of the war's consequences. Interestingly, a pro-Israel outlet, Honest Reporting, revealed that another boy, reportedly Mohammed's brother, appeared in the background of other images, looking significantly healthier. They criticized the media for repeatedly using unverified images and unchecked claims, suggesting that these narratives fit a specific agenda, portraying Israel as waging war against a defenseless civilian population. In conclusion, this incident raises important questions about the responsibility of media outlets in accurately representing complex humanitarian issues. Are they prioritizing sensationalism over truth? What do you think about the ethical implications of this situation? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, a personal reflection. It's hard to reconcile the unbearable image of a mother cradling her emaciated child in Gaza with the legacy of courage and compassion that runs through my own family history. Yet this stark contrast is at the heart of a deeply troubling reality. But here's where it gets controversial. How can a nation celebrated for honoring acts of humanity during one of history's darkest chapters appear indifferent to suffering unfolding just miles away? Let me explain further. Recently, I came across a photograph that stopped me in my tracks. A haunting depiction of a skeletal child in Gaza, lying weak and frail in their mother's arms. The accompanying article, featured on the front page of your publication, "We have faced hunger before, but never like this," 24 July, detailed the harrowing conditions in Gaza, where starvation has become a grim, daily reality for far too many. These visuals are not just shocking. They demand reflection and action. This story hit especially close to home because over a year ago, I received a letter from Yad Vashem, the revered Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem. It informed me that my Polish grandparents had been posthumously honored for saving Rosa, the Jewish schoolgirl who was friends with my father's sister back in 1942. My grandparents risked everything, literally putting their lives on the line to provide Rosa with false papers so she could survive World War II. Their bravery and selflessness inspire awe even today. As part of this recognition, I was invited by the Israeli embassy in London to attend an award ceremony celebrating my grandparents' heroism. At first, I felt immense pride. However, as the conflict in Gaza dragged on, my emotions shifted. With each passing day, reports emerged of civilians caught in the crossfire, enduring unimaginable hardships, while aid remained frustratingly out of reach. Eventually, I made the difficult decision to decline the invitation. As long as thousands of innocent people continue to suffer and die in Gaza, accepting such an accolade felt profoundly wrong. Like my grandparents, I consider myself a humanitarian. They sacrificed for one life. I strive to honor them by standing up for countless others. But this leads us to the heart-wrenching question. How can a country with institutions dedicated to preserving memories of rescue and resilience turn a blind eye to the plight of innocents nearby? Just think about it. Gaza is only a short distance from warehouses stocked with food supplies. Beyond that lies Israel itself, a nation whose citizens enjoy living standards comparable to those in Western countries. From my home in Swaffham Prior, Cambridgeshire, the drive to the Israeli embassy in London is roughly 50 miles. Coincidentally, that's almost exactly the same distance between Jerusalem and the starving population in Gaza. Doesn't proximity come with responsibility? And this is the part most people miss. The issue isn't merely logistical or political, it's moral. What does it say about our collective values when we allow preventable suffering to persist within sight of abundance? Does remembering past atrocities obligate us to act against present injustices? Or is memory simply performative if it doesn't translate into meaningful change? These questions deserve answers, and more importantly, they warrant discussion. Do you believe the lessons of history should guide modern actions, or do circumstances justify exceptions? Should nations prioritize acknowledging historical good deeds while addressing current crises, or must these efforts go hand in hand? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear what you think. Mark Levin dismisses Gaza starvation claims. In a recent discussion, Fox News host Mark Levin dismissed the devastating famine currently affecting Gaza, arguing that reports concerning a malnourished Palestinian infant with existing health issues have been exaggerated. Levin's critique particularly focused on an article from the New York Times, which highlighted distressing conditions faced by families in Gaza, including that of a child suffering from severe malnutrition. Levin, known for his staunch support of Israel and as a part of Donald Trump's Homeland Security Advisory Council, vehemently criticized international leaders who have alleged that Israel is purposefully starving the people of Gaza. He contended that these accusations are misguided and emphasized that during wartime, the responsibility of feeding adversaries complicates military operations. You can't be expected to nourish the enemy while trying to overcome them in a defensive conflict, Levin asserted, implying that the complexities of war necessitate difficult choices. The situation in Gaza has been evolving rapidly, with increasing evidence of malnutrition and hunger among the Palestinian populace due to the blockade that restricts food aid. Reports of children suffering from starvation have been mounting, prompting greater scrutiny on Israel's strict control over aid entering the region. Levin's stance appears increasingly isolated as both local and international pressure mounts on Israel to lift its blockade and work towards a ceasefire. Recently, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced that the UK might formally recognize Palestine as a state if Israel does not take significant steps to alleviate the dire humanitarian conditions in Gaza. His announcement, echoing similar sentiments expressed by French President Emmanuel Macron, has sparked significant backlash from Israeli authorities, who claim that such moves reward terrorist organizations like Hamas and jeopardize regional stability. In stark contrast, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has firmly denied claims of a famine in Gaza, labeling accusations as blatant lies. He proclaimed, "There is no starvation policy in Gaza, and starvation is simply not occurring," insisting instead that humanitarian aid has been permitted in accordance with international laws. This assertion was made in light of rising tensions and criticism regarding what many view as inadequate response to the humanitarian crisis. Former President Trump has diverged from Netanyahu, recognizing the reality of starvation in Gaza, whereas Levin continues to support the Israeli Prime Minister's narrative that reports of famine are largely fabrications influenced by Hamas propaganda. During a recent segment on America's Newsroom, Levin expressed frustration over Starmer's statements, suggesting that European leaders are out of touch with the harsh realities of warfare. He invoked historical instances, such as the bombings of Dresden, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki in World War II, to argue that difficult decisions are often necessary during wartime. Levin challenged his audience with rhetorical questions about what these countries have done to improve the situation, implying that their calls for Israel to change its strategies do not hold weight when compared to their past actions. Additionally, Levin critiqued the New York Times for its narrative depicting suffering in Gaza through the story of an 18-month-old child diagnosed with severe malnutrition, who, according to doctors, also had pre-existing health conditions. Levin interpreted this context as evidence that attempts to attribute blame solely to the Israeli situation were misleading. He insisted that the health complications of the child indicated that claims of widespread starvation were overstated. As the international community increasingly calls for humanitarian aid to Gaza, Levin remains steadfast in his viewpoint that Israel should not be expected to supply food to adversaries in a time of conflict. This is the only nation in modern warfare that has been told to feed its enemies, he remarked, emphasizing the unique challenges Israel faces in the ongoing conflict. Towards the end of Levin's segment, Fox News anchor Dana Perino supported Levin's standpoint regarding the New York Times coverage. She pointed out that when the Times issued a correction, it was largely overshadowed by their regular updates, which received far greater engagement, highlighting what she saw as a disparity in the reach of their reports on such a critical issue.